The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host. And before we get started with this segment, I'd love it if you can hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons. It really helps the channel and it helps me to bring you more safety information. So the first half of the show, we talked about the quote insurrection or riot or protest, whatever you want to call it, event on January 6th when President Biden was sworn in. And one of the things that I ended the segment with was you got to do your own research, because a lot of times the media will put out things that are sensational, not accurate, and we see this over and over and over. It doesn't matter if it's liberal media, it doesn't matter if it's conservative media, and it doesn't even matter if it's foreign media like the BBC or Al Jazeera or whatever foreign news source you have. So I wanted to talk about crime statistics because a lot of times we hear, oh my gosh, crime under Trump was heavy, crime under Biden was heavy, and then you hear the other side saying, no, crime is less, we don't have any crime, no migrants commit crime, and then you have other people saying, no, migrants are responsible, there are jails, they're being released from mental institutions, etc., etc. So the reality is, I've been doing some independent research on my own, and what the source of this information is, and you can do your own research, is a website called crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org, which has a ton of real statistics and easy to read. So this one article, and this is from September of this year, it's entitled New Bureau of Justice Statistics Crime Data Just Released. Violent crime, meaning rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, is soaring under Biden-Harris. So the change in the total violent crime per 1,000 people with the offenses that I just listed, the National Crime Victimization data from 2016 to 2013, is that aggravated assault is down. David Muir says President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is coming down in this country. And Trump says crime is going through the roof. Let's talk about the facts. The FBI data has shown a downward trend in violent crime since the coronavirus pandemic. Violent crime surged during the pandemic, with homicides increasing nearly 30% in 2020 over the previous year, the largest one-year jump since the FBI began keeping records for violent crime. Violent crime was down 6% in the last 3 months of 2023 compared with the same period as before, according to FBI data released in March. Murders were down 13%. New FBI statistics released this June show the overall crime rate has declined 15% in the first 3 months of 2024 compared to the same period last year. However, those 2024 figures are preliminary and may overstate the actual reduction in crime. In fact, the 2020 crime wave has been receding for the past 2 years. Violent crime dropped in 2022 and 2023 according to preliminary data and is on track for another drop in 2024. The FBI's quarterly Uniform Crime Report, or UCR, for the first quarter of 2024 reported that overall violent crime decreased by 15% nationally compared to the first quarter of the previous year. Debate moderators cited the FBI numbers, but Trump does not consider them reliable. They were defrauding statements, Trump shot back. They didn't include the cities with the worst crimes. It was a fraud. The FBI defraud. They were defrauding statements. They didn't want to include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. And that's a quote from Trump. This is false. Violent crime rates, especially for homicide in large cities, has fallen sharply during the Biden presidency after a surge during the pandemic. The violent crime rate is believed to be near its lowest level in 50 years. Trump has a point that the quarterly data released in June by the FBI is incomplete. Not every law enforcement agency reports its data on time or accurately for the report, but he's wrong to suggest that crime is worse today than at any time in American history. Jeff Asher, a crime analyst and consultant, maintained a dashboard that compiles crime statistics, and it shows the murder rate declining significantly year over year in major cities. Overall, there have been 18% fewer murders in 277 cities, according to Asher. President Biden and Vice President Harris also passed the most significant gun reform law in almost 30 years, and now we're seeing the results of that action. Violent crime has plunged to lowest ever in 50 years. New preliminary data from U.S. cities show that homicides were down the first full 6 months of President Biden's last year in office, more than 70% in some places, compared to the same time of President Trump's last year. The historic decline in crime means America is safer, and we're focused on building on this progress. The just-released data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics National Crime Victimization Survey shows violent crime has soared under Biden-Harris. If you look at rape, robbery, and aggravated assaults, the National Crime Victimization Survey doesn't measure murder, because how can you have a survey for someone who's dead? Between 2016 and 2020, violent crime fell by 15% under Trump and soared by 55% under Biden between 2020 and 2023. Under Biden, rape soared 42%, robbery went up 63%, and aggravated assaults rose 55%. If you pick 2021 as the base year for comparison for Biden-Harris, though that makes them responsible for any changes that have already occurred during the first year of their presidency, the numbers are virtually unchanged, with the exception of aggravated assault, which is up much more under this measure. Violent crime is up 55%, rape up 42%, robbery up 53%, and aggravated assault, that means with a weapon, is up 67%. David Muir, as well as the rest of the media and the Democrats, want to look at the FBI's data on reported crime, for their final data for 2023 isn't out yet. But we know people don't report most crimes to the police, and the change in total crime seems more relevant to people's experience than the change in reported crime. Unfortunately, the media doesn't seem to understand the difference between the number of crimes reported to the police and the total number of crimes. In addition, there are also problems with the FBI's measure of reported crimes. For example, in 2022, 31% of police departments stopped reporting crime data to the FBI, including departments in 3 of the 5 most populous cities: New York, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. Another 24% of police departments only partially reported crime data. Thus, fewer than half of police departments reported crime data to the FBI. Very interesting. Another article on the exact same website talks about the percent in changes in violent crime under Biden that are statistically significant. I also want to touch on something that is in one of my books called The Opposite of Safe. You can get it at theoppositeofsafe.com, where I discuss the fact that mass shootings, the definitions are different depending on who you talk to. Also on crimeresearch.org, massive errors in FBI's active shooting reports from 2014 to 2023 where civilians stop attacks. Instead of 4%, the correct number is at least 35%. Excluding gun-free zones, it averaged over 51%. So what does this all mean? Well, for convenience, there's an Excel file as well as a web page which lists and links to underlying news stories, and there's cases that the FBI missed of both armed and unarmed civilians stopping active shooting attacks. FBI active shooting reports are available via the crimeresearch.org website. So according to the FBI, there were 350 active shooter incidents between 2014 and 2023. Only 14 of them have a defensive gun use, whereas the CPRC says there are 515 active shooters, same time period, and 180 were stopped by citizens or defensive gun use. The shooting that killed 3 people and injured another at the Greenwood, Indiana Mall on July 17, 2022, had national attention because how it ended. A 22-year-old carrying a licensed handgun fatally shot the attacker. When he was praised for his courage and skill, squeezing off the first shot 15 seconds after the attack began from 40 yards, much of the immediate news coverage drew from the FBI-approved statistics to assert that armed citizens almost never stop such attackers. Evidence compiled by the CPRC, or the Crime Prevention Research Center, shows that the sources the media relied on undercounted the number of instances in which armed citizens have thwarted such attacks by an order of more than 10, saving untold numbers of lives. Of course, law-abiding citizens stopping those attacks are not rare. What is rare is national news coverage of those incidents. Although there are many news stories about the Greenwood shooting, they suggested that defensive use of guns might endanger others. There is no evidence that these acts have harmed innocent victims. The FBI reports that armed citizens only stopped 14 of the 350 in that time period, and the FBI defines an active shooter incident as those in which an individual actively kills or attempts to kill people in a populated public area. But it does not include those it deems related to other criminal activity, such as robbery or fighting over drug turf. An analysis by the CPRC identified that in a total of 515 active shooter incidents, an armed citizen stopped 180. A previous report only looked at instances when armed citizens stopped what likely would have been mass public shootings. There were another 28 cases that we didn't include where armed civilians stopped armed attacks, but the suspects didn't fire their gun. Those cases were excluded from these calculations, though it would be argued that a civilian also stopped what likely could have been an active shooting event. The FBI reported that armed citizens thwarted only 4% of active shooter incidents, while CPRC found 35%. There's 2 factors that explain this discrepancy. One is misclassified shootings, and 2, overlooked incidents. The Bureau's report about the December 29, 2019 attack on the West Freeway Church of Christ in White Settlement, Texas, that left 2 men dead does not list this as an incident of civic engagement. Instead, the FBI lists this attack as being stopped by a security guard. A parishioner who had volunteered to provide security during worship fatally shot the perpetrator. The man, Jack Wilson, told Dr. John Lott that he was not a security professional, and he said that 19 to 20 members of the congregation were armed on that day, and they didn't even keep track of who was carrying a concealed weapon. I use this story in my concealed carry classes. I'm very familiar with it. The second factor, which is overlooked cases, the FBI more significantly missed 39 cases identified where what would have been a mass shooting was thwarted by armed civilians. There were another 126 active shooting incidents that they missed. There's no reason to think that the news media covers all cases where civilians stopped attacks, and the farther back we go in time, the more cases we're likely to miss. The FBI's active shooting reports do not mention whether attacks occur in gun-free zones. The issue is that when places are posted as gun-free zones, law-abiding citizens obey those rules and would be unable to stop the attacks in those areas, notes Carl Moody, a professor at William & Mary and the CPRC's research director. Criminologists and economists have had the same top 4 preferred policies for stopping mass public shootings. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 was the least effective policy and 10 the most, American criminologists rated the following policies most highly. Allow K-12 teachers to carry concealed handguns with a rating of 6. Allow military personnel to carry on military bases, 5.6. Encourage elimination of gun-free zones, 5.3. And relax federal regulations that pressure companies to create gun-free zones at 5.0. The top 4 policies for economists were the same, but in a different order. I don't need to bore you with those statistical details. So there you have it, folks. The media is not always your friend. Sure, it's great to have information from the media, but the reality is they're not giving you the entire story. With that said, we do have a class coming up October 5th and 6th. If you are interested, you can register at www.firearmmentor.com/classes. This week, there is a case in the Illinois court system, or the federal court system in Illinois, which I'm going to discuss now. This week, the court case challenging the Illinois PICA Act, Protect Illinois Communities Act, or the Assault Weapons Ban, or as I call it, the PU Act, because it stinks, has kicked off in St. Louis, Illinois, or Southern Illinois in St. Louis. On day 2, there was a distinction of military and civilian firearms made during this trial. I think this is quite interesting. Whether commercially available semi-automatic rifles now banned in Illinois are common or too similar to military-grade firearms was the focus of the second day of the bench trial on the Illinois gun and magazine ban. On preliminary grounds, the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the state last year, saying commercially available rifles that Illinois banned in January 2023 are too similar to military-grade rifles and are able to be regulated. Now, per final judgment in the Southern District of the Illinois Federal Court, day 2 of the bench trial was dominated by James Roncanian, a former longtime engineer and director of firearms development and production for Remington. He said that there are material differences between modern sporting rifles and military spec firearms. Plaintiff's attorney Thomas Magg explained the impact of his testimony. Magg said the witness explained correctly that there is a distinction in the AR-15 and M16 lower receivers and internal parts. And he said this after court adjourned for the day this week, Tuesday. He also said you cannot simply put fully automatic parts in a run-of-the-mill semi-automatic AR-15. He said he's never seen a modified AR-15, quote, in the wild. The expert testified modifying an AR-15 to be full auto would be illegal by federal law and would be dangerous as military spec burst and full auto firearms are built with different and more durable components than commercially available semi-automatic only firearms. He also said that he never had any military contract ask for an AR-15 or similar semi-automatic only system, or any AR-15 with bump stocks or trigger cranks, devices that speed up the rate of fire for semi-automatic weapons. Litigants also discussed with the expert various reports from the ATF about the numbers of manufactured rifles from more than 80 different manufacturers. The numbers of semi-automatic firearms was elusive as the ATF reports do not indicate the difference between a bolt action and a semi-automatic rifle. But the expert said just by reviewing the numbers from the manufacturers that only make modern sporting rifles or semi-autos, there are hundreds of thousands of them produced each year. Magg, the attorney, said that shows how common such rifles are, and they're not only for police. Magg also said, as the witness enunciated, if law enforcement are buying all these firearms, there will be no room in their police stations or their cars to store them all. The state, as defendants, highlighted in the cross-examination that the expert hadn't worked for Remington since about 2017 and is now a consultant for the firearm industry, including the National Shooting Sports Foundation, or NSSF. During the cross-examination, the state drilled into the difference between military spec and civilian firearms when considering pounds of pressure to pull the trigger. For the military, the expert said the pounds of pressure is higher, or around 6 pounds of pressure, to ensure there's no unintentional trigger pulls. Civilian firearms have pressure could be as low as 2.5 pounds. So what does that mean? Well, if you were to point a gun up, and remember up is not a safe direction, unloaded, and put weights on the trigger, it would take 6 pounds of weight to move that trigger back, or 2.5 pounds on a civilian rifle. Magg said, I'm not sure the defense understood what a trigger pull was, but with what they got, I think they did as well as they could, said Magg. The state has their chance to bring witnesses to testify as early as Wednesday this week when the trial resumes in East St. Louis. So this is kind of an early report. I get this. I'm recording this Wednesday morning. The reason why I'm recording this Wednesday morning is because later today on Wednesday, I'm going to be having shoulder surgery. And as such, I don't know if I will be loopy from the anesthesia or the pain meds afterwards. So I wanted to record this earlier on rather than later and have me slur my words and sound not intelligent. And I have some other pre-recorded material just in case I have a longer term on the painkillers, because it's hard to predict. I did have my other shoulder operated on several years ago, so I know exactly what to expect. I'll be a little bit debilitated. The second half of September, I'm kind of out of the mix as far as teaching classes or showing people how to disassemble guns, just because my arm is going to be in a sling and I'm not going to be able to use it. I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRESS2logic.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show. I always offer free cleaning classes to anyone who has taken either 2 lessons or a full concealed carry class, where I teach the students how to disassemble and reassemble their specific firearm. Because a Glock takes down different than a Smith & Wesson Shield, takes down different than a Springfield Armory XD. They all take apart and they have similar parts, but they take apart and reassemble a little bit differently. So when someone buys a new gun, it's very difficult in a concealed carry class to say, all right, well, let's take 50 guns and take them all apart. The Mossberg new handguns also take apart completely differently. I had a little bit of a hard time with that, and I've known guns for over 4 decades. So they all are a little bit different, and I offer this to my students as many times as they want. We can get together, because what's going to happen is across the table from them, I'm going to be cleaning either the same gun or a similar gun, at least on how it disassembles, and the student is going to mimic my actions. So they'll be cleaning the barrel first, then the slide, then the frame, or whatever order it happens to go in. I always recommend cleaning the barrel first, because as you push the cylindrical brush through, there's an aerosol effect, and it kind of gets on other parts. So if you do that first and then clean the other parts, you don't have to re-clean the other parts. With that said, let's talk a little bit about maintenance. You should clean your guns each time you shoot them, especially if they're being used for defensive purposes. Now, I have a student, he had a Glock, an original Glock, hadn't been cleaned in 25 years. Several years ago, I met with him, and we cleaned the gun. And now it's a clean gun, but it still went bang every time. And a lot of guns will do that, particularly Glocks. You can beat the crap out of a Glock, and it will still rock. All right, I thought that was funny. Hopefully you did too. The real reason why, you want to get rid of the buildup. You want the firearm to function properly. But picture this. You're at home, 2 a.m, you hear your door getting kicked in. You grab your firearm, you take up a defensive position, and you say, "Get out of my house. I have a gun." And the bad guy leaves. You go ahead and you clear the house. There is no one there, but your front door is hanging off the hinges. Most people, their next step would be to call the police. And the police are going to come and they're going to investigate. And this is what they're going to ask you. What happened? And you're an honest person, so you're going to say, well, I heard this big crash. My wife nudged me to get up, and because I have hearing, my wife nudged me to get up because I wear earplugs because she doesn't stop snoring. It's ridiculous. But I didn't hear it, so she heard it. She woke me up. I grabbed my firearm. I cleared the house. And when I cleared the house, no one was there. But obviously someone was there because our front door was kicked in. And then the cop's going to say, well, are you a legal gun owner? And if you're in Illinois, they're going to ask you for your FOID card. And since you're an honest person, you have a FOID card. You're going to show it to them. And then they're going to say to you, did you shoot the gun? And you're going to say, no, I didn't. Because you're honest. Are you sure you didn't shoot the gun? And you're going to continue and say, no, I didn't shoot it. But you didn't clean it from the last time. And the police officer takes his finger or her finger and wipes the top of the gun. And their finger comes up with all sorts of schmutz, burnt and unburnt gunpowder and residue. And in that little micro scenario, from the police officer's perspective, you lied. Police officers are taught that everybody lies. The victim lies because they want the offender to get into more trouble. The offender lies because they're trying to get out of trouble. And the victim just wants to be on TV. Most exciting thing that's ever happened to them. Now, the reality is, I never believed the witness lies thing until earlier this year when there was a man released from prison for a murder that he was convicted of 13 or 14 years ago. How did he get released? Well, 13 years after he served in prison, it came out that the eyewitness, in other words, the visual witness, was legally blind. Now, how the heck do attorneys not know that at the time of the case? I have no idea. It is a ridiculous comment, but this gentleman was cleared. So everybody lies to the police, and at least that's what the police believe. Hope you enjoyed this segment. I will be back next week with more exciting information. Thank you for listening. We have monthly concealed carry license CCL classes in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Dates can be seen at firearmmentor.com/classes. If you have a question, we can be reached at www.firearmmentorcard.com. That is our electronic business card, has all of our contact information and links in it. It's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you at the shooting range. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor signing off. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.